Well, hello everyone, and we are back once again for another live edition of the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner with your host, of course, retired Army First Sergeant Paul Holbert. And it's good to see everyone back tonight. And of course, for those of you that watch the show live, we're glad you're here. For those of you that don't but catch it on the recordings, we're also very glad for your participation, because it's because of your participation and your comments that helped us make the list of the top 25 podcasts in Northern Virginia to see. So we definitely appreciate that. And we appreciate your participation and watching the show. And please continue to send in those emails and those suggestions and questions that you have. So we really appreciate that. Before we get started tonight, of course, as always, I just want to take a moment to mention our sponsors. And of course, first, Nationwide IT Services. NIS is a service-disabled veteran-owned small business owned by retired Army Warrant Officer C.K. Park. C.K. and his crew has offices all over the United States as they support both public and private sector contracts. But I will tell you that whether your business is in need of IT training, security, professional development, whatever it may be, he's got the staff there that can help you. So look him up. There's his number and his website. Give them a call and they'll be glad to talk to you to see if there's a way that they can help you. I also want to thank Hill and Ponton, PA. Hill and Ponton, of course, are veterans disability attorneys located in Florida. Hill and Ponton folks have been in business for over 30 years, and they have helped thousands and thousands of veterans and veteran families make sure that they could get what they deserve from the VA and help them navigate what can be often a very confusing time trying to get through the VA disability and benefit system. So if you're in need of help, take a look. There's their website. There's their number. Give them a call. They also provide free webinars on the website, so you're welcome to go and look at those to provide you a lot of information. All right, so let's get into tonight's show, and we've got a guest tonight I want to introduce to you, Melanie Redding. Melanie is an 8-year Air Force veteran, and she actually, interestingly enough, she started out at March Air Force Base in California, where she was a military brat, as we love to call them, as her father was a loadmaster for C-141s in the Air Force, and then later on, her father also was commissioned as a missile officer. So growing up in a military household, that led her later on in 1998 to join the Air Force as an imagery intelligence analyst. And she spent 8 years serving in a number of assignments, and we'll talk about that just a little bit. But she also went on to complete her undergraduate degree and master's degrees in space operations, an MBA, and then in management. So she's been really busy in school, keeping herself current. And one of the interesting things I think we'll find out from her as we go is Melanie was also a basic training instructor in the Air Force, or what you and I would think about as a drill sergeant in the Army or a drill instructor in the Marine Corps. So it'll be interesting to find out some of her experiences from there. So Melanie, I want to welcome you tonight and thank you for taking the time to come on the show.
Yes, thanks for having me and encouraging me to be here tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I always, it doesn't matter who the veteran is. I always love to get my veterans on, in addition to our veteran service providers. But to have my veterans on is always really great, especially the female veterans, because it's so hard to get you female veterans on. You ladies are difficult to pull in. So I'm really glad to have you on. And so I wanted you, if you would, share with us. I mean, your life started in a military household.
Yeah.
What was it like for you growing up with an Air Force dad?
When you're growing up, you don't realize that your life is different or special. But then when you reflect, there's different moments in your life. You're like, oh, that's really unique, right? And I look back at my life now, and I would not be here today if it wasn't for a large contribution to how I was raised, and that happened to be in a military family. And my earliest memories was my dad coming home in a flight suit and his helmet. And when he put his helmet down, I'm like 3 years old, and I love putting it on, and I'd run around the house with it on. I can't see anything, and I'm like clunking into the wall. And I was sad that when he'd leave for his trips, but mostly also sad because he takes his helmet with him, right? And I really didn't understand the significance of, like, he was really putting his life in danger, especially in the late 70s, early 80s, with flight safety at that time. So in hindsight and understanding some of his stories, I'm like, wow. I just know his military suit, like there's a suitcase that you have to go on the plane. So he's a load master. I am not sure what was in there other than paper, and sure, I did get in trouble for making a paper party once. So that, in hindsight, was really transformational, and probably how I realized like, hey, I could do that job. Maybe not the load master part, but I can join the military. I can do that too. And if it wasn't for my dad in that military family, and seeing other women in the military, and seeing different jobs in the military, doctors and nurses, and my dad being this load master, and understanding what he did, like, I didn't understand when my mom was upset that he was supporting the conflict in Grenada.
Yeah.
I still have to look at a map to see where Grenada is. And so I really do hope we can get him to come on here and tell his stories of being a load master. Because then I did a little bit of research during the time, and it's like, oh, there was like 7 significant accidents with the C-141s between like 1976 and 1984. So hopefully he'll be able to expand on those stories. And I was not living on a military base with them until he was commissioned to be an officer as a missileer. And so while I was aware, I didn't really get it until I was about 6, living at Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota. And that is in the 1986, height of the Cold War. So that was the first time in school when they had drills, to me, to experience having to go in the hallway, because I'm on school on a military base, to plan for nuclear disaster. And I mean, in hindsight, you're like, oh, what is that going to do now? But you're like, okay, well, I guess the Russians could be coming. And that was just normal. And since I came from so much freedom living in the mountains in Big Bear and an A-frame type lifestyle, I felt really constrained on the military base. So I used to dig my way out of the fence area, and I would used to like go out and bike and stuff. And some, I think a military police officer came and brought me back home one day. I was like, you realize you shouldn't do that, right? I was all of 7. I was like, hey, I wanted to buy 5 fossils, man. I got like $3, and now check out all my cool fossils and stuff. And they're like, no, this isn't. You just can't go wherever you want. You have to go through the gate. You can't go under the gate. So as I got older, I started to get in the rhythm of it, and it was traumatic moving from one military base to another military base, or another set of people, to make new friends. And in hindsight, it's made me a stronger person, and I like who I am today. But as a military brat, I did not adjust well to that.
It's interesting because, I've had a number of guests on, of course, who grew up in military homes, and they all talked about how much it made an impact on their lives. So you went on and you joined the Air Force in 1998 as an imagery intelligence analyst. And then, once you got settled in, you went to Langley Air Force Base, of course, here in Virginia. And I thought it was interesting because the assignment you had there, you were involved in intel for the Kosovo conflict. And it just so happens that during my time in the military, the unit I was in over there, I was back and forth to Bosnia and Kosovo myself, on the ground, of course, being in the Army. But you were looking at analyzing mass graves and putting up target folders and different things like that, right?
Yeah. So after I transitioned to the missile bases and decided where I was going to go with my life, my dad was moving around so much. I enlisted by way of, I really wanted to go to school. I was excited to join the military. I was very indifferent for my career field. I was just really focused on school. I wasn't full on, confession mode, full on like, oh, I can't wait to go to war and shoot a gun and, do all this cool guy stuff. I joined the Air Force, right? I'm like, where's my computer, right? Like, but thankfully they gave me a computer, and I was like, wow, what is this imagery stuff's really cool. And it really didn't hit me of what my job was until my first duty assignment. Imagery analysis training back in the day was anywhere between 6 and 8 months. And the first day I got there was like the breakdown of the conflict of Kosovo. So and then the F-117 crash was a mass search, and the mass grave search, and continuing to support our forces. Kosovo is unique for the fact that it's always cloud covered. So then I had to get stronger in understanding SAR imagery, synthetic aperture radar, and understanding that this is real and this makes the difference in lives of people, was mind-blowing to me. And I had a really good team of people that I worked with, and it was totally adrenaline rush, because if there wasn't a conflict, my job was to build target folders and maintain military-based monitoring and controlling and long-term strategic analysis of various locations across what we call the bad guy belt. And the bad guy belt, just like think of the Desert Storm timeframe, the Iraqs, the Irans, the China's, the Russias, the North Koreas. So it's a standard like target deck of normal stuff, and we were still using grease pencils back in the day. We had electronic types of imagery to look at, and then there was still, depending on where you were, traditional images where you take out the you actually look at it not on a computer. And for reference, I brought down an Earth book, but you would look at a photo instead of using zoom. Let's say you're looking at this military base right here. Let me know if you can see it, right? And then you put this on to zoom in. And that was your fancy zoom button back in the day.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was the coolest thing. I could look at the Earth for days and months. Just like any other kid with the electronic component, I wanted to do my job faster because I'm fascinated by learning, right? So I wanted to click through and do all my reports and then focus on how I get my undergrad and how I get my graduate degree. And I used to click a lot of photos to be cloud covered, because there would be like a little tiny cloud and I would click cloud covered, right? And then I'd move on to the next one. And somebody came to me and said, every time you hit cloud covered, you're potentially retasking a satellite. And I was like, what? And that conversation totally changed my world. And I was then totally obsessed with, how does a satellite take a picture and then how does it land on my desk? And then from there, like, that's it. Now I know what I want to do. I want to do something with space, and I want to figure this out, and I want to be a part of developing future space things. I thought I was just going to do management, but I ended up doing development work. So that duty assignment, keep in mind, this is 1998, and then you roll into 2000. I was still there in 2001 after I was accepted to be a drill instructor. And
I got to ask you about that. You ended up being a basic training instructor or a drill instructor. How did that happen? How was that for you?
So keep in mind, being a military brat, I'm not transitioning from an enlisted family to an officer family, and seeing the difference in like some cultures and perception management. And officers are known for leadership and in their management of and being responsible for enlisted personnel, and then enlisted personnel have their own management and structure. Then I was taking these management classes, and I was like, okay, these management classes are great, but they're not talking about leadership. And military has a lot of leadership, but I don't know that officers always have that leadership the way that, like, being a drill instructor, I think you really learn leadership, not just management. And so somebody has once told me that I like to play life on level hard. So instead of just reading about leadership in a book, I'm like, let's do this. Let's go in.
Yeah.
And I wanted to really learn what it meant to lead and to actually learn to lead. And I was also, somebody wanted to be a drill instructor to just like boss the trainees around. And I was in this like forum of like, they're trying to recruit you to be a drill instructor. And I was on the fence. I wasn't even serious about applying until those guys were like, oh yeah, I can't wait to yell at them and blah, blah, blah. I can't even remember the vocabulary words they used, but I was just like, no, you can't do that in my brain. So then they got up and I was just like, I filled out the paperwork and I was like, they were like, yeah, we want you. And then they rejected those other guys. And so I'm like, okay, fine, I'm in. If it means a difference between those guys going in and doing this, and then I already really wanted to understand that leadership. And it gave me so much. Like I gave it a lot and it taught me a lot because I was, after September 11th, we stayed longer, you know, you supported that mission and worked 24/7 to do support there, real time from an image data munitions analysis perspective of dropping bombs and stuff. But this was different. It was real. It was personal. And I was 21 years old and I was an E4 with like three years of experience in the military, coming up on 4, leading people that were anywhere from 17 to 28, 29 years old at the time. Most of them a whole lot bigger than me and most of them male. I'm glad I was ignorant and I didn't know how formidable that was at the time. I was just like, yeah, well, I mean, they said I could do it, so I can obviously do it, right? And don't worry, they did do a psych eval. So there was so much I learned there. And yelling is not how you actually motivate your people, even though that's like a great marketing campaign, right?
Yeah.
And I just fell in love with each one of my flights. Like they gave me everything and I gave them everything. I was not expecting how emotional being a drill instructor was for me. I wasn't it's a very stressful job. That job taught me that you can't be serious all the time. You have to learn how to play and live at your job. You have to find ways to break down stress. And I'm so glad, even though it was painful at the time, I'm glad I learned those skills and I've been able to give that to other people. I
was just going to say, you know what that reminds me of? My drill sergeants I had in the Army back in 1981, they were like that as well. I mean, they could be very demanding, very hard, but at the same time, there were times they knew when to throw in a little compassion, a little humor.
Yeah.
So it was a good mix. So you how long were you in that assignment?
I was only there for about 2 years. I had a family hardship and I left early. But I mean, they're the hardest and best years. I do have some life tips, a couple more that I want to share with you guys. You're speaking about that drill instructor, about that being strong and being a leader is the being strong enough to be vulnerable. And then if your whole flight is messing up, then that's probably you need to look in the mirror and you're probably misinstructing and doing something wrong. And I think that's totally transferable over to civilian life as well. And then the last one was it taught me how to fail and how to pick back up and carry on, because you will fail as a drill instructor. And everyone in your flight will fail one way or another, and how to coach them back, how to get back up. And so if you ever have one of those days and you want a reference, I can help you get back up from failure. My contact information, just go through Paul.
Yeah, and I know that I've always had drill sergeants, ex-drill sergeants that I ran into through my career, told me that was a rewarding assignment for them. So you spent 8 years in the Air Force, and you finally were ready to move on. And what I want to do is we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back from the break, I want to talk to you a little bit more about what you started doing once you left the Air Force, because you still stayed pretty busy. So we're going to talk about that when we come back from the break. To those of you in the audience, if you'll hold on, we will be right back.
In service of our nation, you gave everything you had. You sacrificed your comfort, your peace, and sometimes even your well-being. Over 3 decades, Hill and Ponton has helped to be a guiding light for veterans seeking their rightful disability benefits. When our heroes are in need, we are not just lawyers, we're an ally, a team who understands the struggles you faced. If you're a veteran seeking the benefits you deserve, let us stand with you on this journey, because every battle deserves a hero, and no hero should fight alone.
Living in a world filled with lunacy, it seems that stress and turmoil follow us everywhere we go. Perhaps it's gotten to the point where you wish you could turn off the distractions of daily living and have a good laugh. Well, we have a recommendation for you. Pick up a copy of The Dunce Cap, a humorous and satirical look at American society and the follies of our culture. Join the author Paulholbert as he takes you on a trip through the nonsensical and often ridiculous practices of our everyday lives, from political correctness and our legal system to the folly of the media and our obsession with reality television. See how these and other outrageous practices of everyday people make us a perfect cast for the next slapstick sitcom. So go ahead, you know you need it. Take a frank look at the more nonsensical side of American society and see why we are prime candidates for the stool in the corner and the dunce cap that sits on top.
All right, welcome back, everyone. And you've been watching the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner. And of course, our guest tonight is Air Force veteran Melody Redding. And before the break, Melody was sharing some of her experiences in the Air Force, both as an analyst and, of course, an intelligence and image analyst, and, of course, as an Air Force drill instructor. So I know you, Melody, you were talking about before the break that was a rewarding assignment, but you finally decided, I guess, around 2006, it was time to leave the service, and you then moved into your civilian career, and you started out, with Kodak, I think it was?
Yeah, the original component of Kodak in Rochester, New York.
Yeah.
And that location is the place where they did a lot of the U2 film processing. That's also the location where they designed that Hubble telescope lens.
Yeah.
So a lot of passive sensor technology. With that, while I was able, within those 8 years at the age of 25, to complete my undergrad and graduate degree, that graduate degree was in space operations, which enabled me to get that job in at Kodak, combined with my military experiences in imagery, analyst and mission utility assessments of impact and new technologies. But that was fascinating work. And I transitioned into being an image scientist and system engineering engineer, for lack of a better description, unbeknownst to me at the time. I just hit the ground running, and I was like, well, that's an odd description for my job, but cool, I got this. And going back to my fascination of how things work and how to make the role different in the way that we think we want it to go, and the tools that we need to make it go that way, that allowed me to really take apart systems and ultimately continue to do design and development work for commercial work and defense work, just depended on what the project was. And then my transition down to the Washington, D.C. area and various other government programs, and a little bit more operational integration of science and technologies. So
Well, you went back to Colorado for a while, didn't you? Or you're still moving around some?
Oh, yeah. So I really liked working for ITT and doing the development and technologies. One of my projects while I was wrapping up my time in the military was hyperspectral imaging. And within the various contracts within Kodak, they had a lot of processing for hyperspectral, but there wasn't a publicized, to my knowledge, hyperspectral sensor in space. The Army sponsored was a part of a sponsorship of a test satellite for hyperspectral imagery. So I went to go work for the government as a GS-13 or something, doing advanced analysis and application for hyperspectral integration into other technologies for military application.
Well, that was for the Army, wasn't it?
It was, and so I got
Yeah.
a little bit of that Army culture.
Yeah, I have to tell you,
It's like,
you know,
what is this?
my younger brother spent 8 years in the Air Force, and me being an Army first sergeant, we always had this term whenever I would catch my soldiers with their hands in their pockets. I would tell them to take off their Air Force gloves. Not in there. So, me and my younger brother used to go back and forth at one another. But I had some good exposure too, even on active duty, because when we were in the desert for Desert Storm, when we were deployed to various exercises, we usually had a fast mover Air Force guy with us calling in air support. And it was normally an Air Force staff sergeant or tech sergeant most of the time. So we got a little bit of that cross talk and cross training and stuff like that. So I'm sure it was interesting to you as well.
Okay, I got to tell you a joke. My husband's heard it like 50 times. So what's the Marine battle cry?
Submarine?
The Marine, like, is it hua or is it
Hua?
hua?
Yeah, hua.
Hua. All right, now what's the Army's? What's the difference between that? Hua?
Yeah.
Is it hua?
They didn't start doing that till after I retired, so I couldn't tell you.
It's probably hua. It's still like hua.
Yeah, it's like hua.
Hua. Yeah.
Oh, no, I know what it is. The Marines is hoorah.
Hoorah. Okay.
The Army is hua.
Hua. And then
Hua.
what is the Navy's? I don't know. Maybe they don't have one. Oh, but I know what the Air Force's is. Do you know what it is?
No.
Why?
I'm going to have to ask my grandson.
But no. It gets better. What do you think the Space Force's is? Wah. All right, that's it. I'm fired. No more mom jokes.
So I'm assuming your husband's getting a good crack at it, right?
Yeah. We're turning into.
Yeah. No, you always have that.
Grandchildren now.
You always have that cross-service banter going on, but yes, I just noticed that you had done some work around the Army. So you came back to DC and you went to work for Boeing for a while, right?
I did, but kind of going back to that, I like the building component. I like building the new technologies. I like being part of that integration to actually make the change. Once stuff normalizes in the military and you get a new technology and people can go off and do their analysis, I really like looking for the next new thing. And then Boeing was an interesting, fascinating work. It was a lot of rapid deployment of new technologies, and I really enjoyed it. The one thing, going back to the veteran integration in some of these groups, going back to Boeing was the time that I realized it was a very civilian company for the most part, right? And I realized that there was these veteran groups popping up. I did RWB, Wear Blue to Remember type groups, and I really enjoyed them. And that I didn't realize just how military I was until I started working for Boeing. And some of those groups really helped me connect to other people that I'm like, here's my family. And I just really learned to embrace being a veteran and connecting with people with similar pasts as myself. And when I first left the military, I felt like I was running from it, and I was trying so hard to be a civilian. And I'm like, just like being and I took it like being a military, new assignment, new job. I'm like, okay, I'm all in. Like, I got the uniform, I got the suit, I got the or, like whatever, I got the everything. And I had no green in my closet for at least 8 years after I left the military. I had to go to like some St. Patrick's thing. And I'm like, I have no green in my closet. And then I was like, and that was around the time, maybe it was only 4 years. It was about the time that I'm like, okay, well, maybe I need to really look into this veteran thing. And I'm so glad I did. It helped me embrace who I was, and it made me a better person as a civilian, oddly enough, by becoming closer with other veterans.
I have to tell you, I remember those days as well, making that transition. And when I got my first job, it was with Sprint PCS here in Northern Virginia as a level 2 trainer. And there was an Air Force retiree, a retired Air Force tech sergeant, who was a trainer as well. We worked together. And my first time showing up for a meeting there at work, I walked into the room about 5 minutes prior to the meeting. There was absolutely no one there. Just about the time the meeting was scheduled to start, he walked in. About a minute before, he walked in and he goes, "Yep." He said, you're ex-military. He said, "I'm not surprised to see you here." And I said, "Well, I noticed you at least walked in on time, ready for the meeting." He said, "Yeah." He said, "Now we just have to sit and wait for the rest of these civilians to decide to show up."
Yeah.
And, it took a lot of getting used to and adjusting to making that adjustment from the structured military discipline and moving into a civilian atmosphere and a civilian workplace.
I also struggled with subtleties. Going back to even from being the drill instructor for 2 years, I had colorful language that I adopted. It's like, I'm not proud of it, but it did come back.
Somehow I just can't see that coming out of you for some reason.
That's good.
Yeah.
And then just adjusting in the military, especially being enlisted, you get course corrected real quick. Corrector. And in the civilian world, they don't just tell you you're doing something wrong. They tell somebody else, and then somebody else comes to you and you're like, "We've heard that maybe you've lit up the office with colorful words." And then I say, WT whatever. And who was it? Why didn't they just come to me? And yeah, I'll work on this. And sure, I didn't know I was being offensive. I'm so sorry. Yeah. And then, I'm going down every single cube and I'm like, "Do you have a problem? I'm so sorry." And then they're like mortified that I'm in their face. You just don't do that. And like traditional cubicle land, you just let it go. And you typically don't always confront somebody when you're uncomfortable about something. And that was a hard life lesson, adjusting to being a civilian.
Well, so as I mentioned, I mean, you continue into work. You've done, all these things. Been an Air Force drill instructor, an analyst, an intelligence analyst. Moving back and forth to these various jobs. And, despite being busy, you managed to, your son graduated from high school and now he's in the Air Force and doing what, cyber transport, I think?
Yes. And he's very happy.
Yeah.
And I was a little worried, just like any other parent, when your child wants to go into the military. It's like, do you understand what it means? Like, I was in a military family and I'm not sure I completely understood what it meant.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, I want to do this." And he didn't want to go to college before. And I would never, ever push somebody for the military or college before they're ready. But going back to that drill instructor, I do have this. You're not Air Force. I don't know if you can see it. It's probably a little glary.
The CC might be able to bring the screen up a little bit.
But it's my son's 341. Did you have 341s in the... Okay. So in the Army, I don't know how they discipline you, but being true to Air Force, they discipline you with paperwork. And a 341 is either a demerit or it can be an accomplishment. And so this was his half-folded 341 that gets tucked underneath his bed when I went to the dorms.
Okay, yeah.
And then I framed it because if you're former Air Force, this is near and dear to your heart. I'm not sure if officers use these 341s during their training. But but yes, like this is my prize for him joining the military, and a little bit of a sweet circle.
So that's like what that sounds like is, and if I'm trying to remember, it's a 20 for the Army. What was it? A 2186 or a 2286? It was like a counseling form where if you did something wrong, they could use it. If you did something really good, they could use it. So it sounds like that's similar, that same thing.
But normally it was used for something bad. Like it could have been that you forgot your put on your hat or something, that kind of thing. But
well, I had in the Army, that's what it was used for primarily. And when I was a platoon sergeant in Europe, I had 2 of my soldiers did an excellent job preparing one of our armored vehicles for a display, a public display. Did a great job. And so I wrote them both up on the counseling form, at least initially. And then later on, we got them a certificate of achievement for the work they did. But I wrote them up a positive counseling form. And when I called them into my office one at a time told them that I wanted to issue them a counseling form, they were trying, what? Sergeant, what did I do wrong? What did I? So, they just took it as automatically it was a negative thing,
Yeah.
But so your son's in the Air Force now, and you're continuing to stay busy with some different organizations, like Wear Blue. And I know there's one big one that you're really now. You joined the Air Force cycling team.
Yeah. So it turns out they let old people join the Air Force cycling team.
Old people, come on.
Well, okay. So in all seriousness, the Air Force cycling team brings together veterans and the community. And 1, I like cycling, and 2, I'm very thankful for everything the Air Force has done for me and all the veterans groups. This one in particular is focused on wounded warriors for the Air Force and a heavy hit in Air Force recruiting and creating a positive image for the Air Force and Space Force. So it's everything that I love all rolled up into one. And I even have my husband, I recruited him to be part of the Air Force cycling team, and he loves it so much.
I'm sure.
But this one is a newer event. This is a specific event that is sponsored by the Air Force cycling team in conjunction with the Air Force and Space Force. And what we do, this is what we cycle from Kitty Hawk, where the Wright brothers did their first flight, and the Wright brothers started as being cycling mechanics, and they had I believe a bicycle shop. And then we bike all the way up to the Air Force Memorial in celebration of the camaraderie, health, and togetherness of the Air Force, and then also the transition and adaptation of both technology and the people since the first flight. And it's an amazing event. And the idea came from, like, how do we make a greater impact on not like the way that Marine Corps, when you hear Marine Corps Marathon, Marine Corps Marathon. How do we do something that is that significant? Like when you say, yeah, I ran Marine Corps, you're like, oh, wow, good job. Like, that's amazing, right? And we want to get to that point with M2M of like, oh, I rode 340 miles in 4 days from Kitty Hawk to the Air Force Memorial. And people should be like, wow, that's amazing, because it turns out it's kind of hard. And it's a priceless event, like the moments that you have. And I've really enjoyed it. I'm going to do it again this year. And then I'm also helping recruit donors and articulate the help that we could benefit from, like volunteers. If you're anywhere on the course, we welcome people coming out to cheer us on. We welcome you just sitting in a parking lot while somebody sits there with snacks and just have conversations with us. If you are like at a gas station and you like make a couple extra breakfast burritos, if you know we're coming through, to if you are a company and you resonate with wanting to hire military veterans, or you want to also inspire future generations by putting on your own kit to join us and to tell the story of how this is attainable. We want your children out there, and we want to inspire them that if they want to join the Air Force, they could, or if they wanted to get a job in the civil service area to support technologies, and also at the very minimum to believe that they can bicycle down a road and with the proper safety equipment. and me being a woman, that you can do this. And I hope to inspire other people to not be so intimidated by all these men with those calves that are bigger than my head.
Yeah.
Sure, I'm not as fast as them, but they still let me play. And then you know, they're actually nice. They're just really intimidating to walk up to for the first time, right? And everyone's it's a great community. So I'm hoping to get the word out for this. And if you can't do it this year, next year, 4 years from now, we really hope to be around. And the Air Force would like to fully sponsor it, and it not to be a solely a nonprofit endeavor, but yeah, just depending on the year is whether or not that they can make it an official Air Force event.
Well, you know, it's amazing the stuff that, not only the stuff that you've done, but you know, the things that you're continuing to do and with work and staying busy. And I have to tell you, Melody, it's you know, it's really been interesting. And for those of you that are watching the show, as we get ready to close, there's the information at the bottom, the Air Force Memorial to Memorial Ride, and the website down there, afccycling.com. You can go on there and take a look and see if there's some way that you can help. I will just share with the audience that we do have one of the deputy directors from M2M Ride who's going to be coming on the show here in the next, probably about the next 2 months. So he's going to come on and share some more about this program that Melody was just talking about. Well, Melody, I before we close the show, I want to ask you one more question here. If you had one message that you'd like to share with the audience tonight, what would it be?
Take risks and learn from your failures. Go at it again, just maybe differently next time.
Yeah, that's interesting. Don't be afraid to make mistakes and try again. You know, and I think the military taught us that quite a bit as well, as you're aware. But you know, I just, my hat's off to you. And well, not right now, but you know, not literally, but figuratively, my hat's off to you for all you've been able to do. And, you know, for your accomplishments, and congratulations on, you know, I'm sure you're proud of your son following in and going into the military, and you'll be watching, you know, what he does as he moves on. And I want to thank you so much, though, for taking the time to be with us tonight as a guest. And, you know, we wish you the best moving forward.
Thank you so much, Paul.
All right. And for those of you out there watching the show, as you know, we will normally try to provide you some good information that you can use. And the website on here is a little long, folks, so you're going to have to freeze the screen, take a snapshot, or you can go to, you can see the https news.va.gov. If you go there, you'll be able to navigate to it. But tax season help for veterans at the VA, there's all kinds of information there, do's and don'ts, things that the VA can help you with as a veteran or a family member of a veteran. So this is the season for that. Take a look at it and see what kind of help you can get. Now, as always, we want to thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. And again, we want to thank our guest this evening, Melody Redding, the Air Force veteran, coming on and sharing her experiences. And for our veterans and their families out in the audience, we want to thank you for your service, and we hope to see you on our next show.